Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Welcome to All Home Care Matters. Today we are excited to welcome Ramie Liddle, the co-author of the book, Driving Miss Norma. Welcome, Ramie.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
So, Ramie, for some viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with this truly remarkable story, Driving Miss Norma, why don't you share with us what Driving Miss Norma is all about?
Sure. I guess I have to start with the fact that my husband and I are nomads, and we've been traveling around the country for decades in a 19-foot Airstream travel trailer. And every winter we would spend time in Baja, Mexico, and every summer we would find our way somehow or another back to northern Michigan where Tim's parents lived. And they were in good shape. We would do their honey-do list and enjoy their company, and that was our routine. There was always kind of an elephant in the room that we never really got over, being able to talk about what happens when they're not in great shape.
Right. And
in the summer of 2015, we were driving north and saying, this is our year. We feel armed and ready to go to have this conversation with them about really, you're 88 and 90 years old, and we better talk about what the future looks like. And we arrived into their driveway. Typically, they would come out and greet us. Norma would always have cookies made, and Tim's favorite all the time. And that time, they didn't come out to the driveway, and we were like, something must be wrong. And we got into the house, and sure enough, they were. Norma had her arm around Leo and her cane in the other hand, and she was trying to help him to get back to his chair from their bathroom. And so, kind of long story short, Leo ended up in the hospital. 10 days later, he died, and 2 days after that, Norma was diagnosed with uterine cancer, a large mass on her uterus. And so we talked to her about, what would she like to do? She's in deep grief. We are recognizing that some shift needs to happen in her life, and said, as far as we can tell. She also made it really clear that I can't stay home alone anymore.
Right.
And we said, well, we can find a care facility for you, or like lots of adult children of aging parents, you can come live with us. And so those were the two options that we put on the table without really, Tim and I really didn't talk about this too much. There was no pro and con list. It was like, this feels like all we have. And we said, but don't give us an answer right away. You can think about it. We have lots of time. We have to close up the paperwork of Leo's life. And so think about it, pray about it, and whenever you're ready to tell us your answer, you let us know. And we were sitting at the dining room table, and 2 minutes later, no, probably a minute and a half later, she crunches on her dill pickle. She was wordless up until that point, and she just looked at us and said, I think I'd like to come along. And Tim and I looked at each other like, oh man, what did we just do?
Right.
Because we didn't have that pro and con. We didn't know what this was going to do to our marriage. How are we going to do this? One thing we did tell her is we would need to get a bigger rig. So the 19 feet, which is about the size of this studio, right, was not going to work for her. And so we figured it out, and we found a used RV that Tim and I slept on a blow-up mattress in the front of it, and Norma had a nice big bedroom in the back, and we hit the road with her, not knowing really what her condition was. She said, no more poking and prodding. I don't want to do chemo and radiation. When the doctor gave her the diagnosis, in fact, she looked at him and he laid out the rest of her life. Like, we'll do hysterectomy, chemotherapy, radiation, a therapeutic nursing home, and then we'll get you into a long-term care facility, and laid it out. And she sat up in this giant, the big wheelchairs that everyone can fit in. And she was less than 100 pounds at the time. And she sat up in her chair and she looked at the doctor dead in the eye. And she said, "I'm 90 years old. I'm hitting the road."
Good for her.
And the doctor was taken aback for sure. But when we questioned him a little bit more and said, "Are we, we live outside of the box for a long time. We have. Are we being irresponsible?" And he said, "You know what?" He said, "As doctors, we see this every day. She's very frail. It's possible that she won't survive the surgery. If she does, it's likely that she'll be in the ICU for a while with horrible side effects. If it were me and I was in that position, I'd want to be in that motorhome." Yeah. And so that gave us kind of this permission to say, okay, we can make this happen. And then the next questions that we asked the doctor were, how is this disease going to progress, and are we capable of caring for her? We don't have children. We don't even know how to care for a 5-year-old, let alone a 90-year-old, and we don't have medical backgrounds, and honestly, we didn't know her very well. I mean, Tim left home at 19 years old and has been this vagabond for all these years, and now coming back to take care of his mom full time, and he had 2 pieces of advice for us. He said, if she just happens to die in her sleep somewhere, you might be parked in a Walmart parking lot in Dubuque, Iowa, and she dies, then call 911 and they will help you. If her health begins to decline to a point where you guys don't feel capable of doing this on your own and you need extra support, no matter where you are in the country, call hospice, wherever that local hospice is, and they will help you. And we were like, okay, we can do this, and so we took off. So that's the gist of the story.
So one of the things that I find fascinating is, here's Norma, who was there for her husband, and she was kind of the housewife, if you will, and she would compliment him. You make mention in the book how he was the one with the funny jokes and the fast comebacks, and she kind of developed her own facial expressions depending on the situation. And now here she's making this decision just a couple of days after his passing, because she's also getting this terrible diagnosis, to kind of leave everything behind, if you will, and just head out on this adventure with really no destination in mind, just an adventure. When you and Tim asked or proposed that as an option, were you expecting her to say yes so quickly?
No. Oh, no.
And did you think she would say yes?
I don't think we had time to even consider. Yeah. Like, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, she's going to be with people that love her. And she there were times when she would love to go out and do something, and Leo was more of like, I'd rather stay home and putter around the yard and watch sports and stuff like that. And so I think that on some level she probably had this longing. She always was very interested every year when we showed up, all the stories that we had to tell about, things that we had done that year. And but at the time we had no idea what she was going to say. No idea.
Well, another thing I found really interesting from the senior care, healthcare side, that I think most families are faced with regularly, is you make mention there was 15 different times that you coined it the talk, and it never really happened. And you make mention we just were chickening out, and that part of the issue was maybe people being faced with that mortality. When you have that conversation, now you're admitting, if you will, in a way, we're mortal, we're not going to be here forever, and eventually, our time comes that we're going to pass. Do you think that was the reason, mostly, that there's 15 times that the question...
That we chickened out?
Yeah.
Yes. I think I need to say that that their last name is Bauer-Schmidt. They're very German and very stoic, and it was never an option to talk about hard things.
Okay.
And we talk about that in the book as we go through with it. Tim's sister died at a very young age, very tragically, and the grief that they experienced was never expressed with us. It was really a hard conversation. And so, yeah, and in fact, it wasn't until I read Atul Gawande's Being Mortal that I got the courage to say, we not only do we need to do this, but we can do this. Yeah. And Tim was halfway through that book on the way to his parents' house when we came upon, okay, it's not we can, it's now we absolutely need to get this sorted out.
What would you recommend to families who, prior to you making that trip up the driveway, finding, Leo's health severely declined, Norma is his crutch, if you will, you were in the bay of conception, and you make mention that we were just having a normal, casual conversation where, what are we going to do when the time comes for our parents? What's the plan? How are we going to handle it? Probably at that moment, you're not even thinking that this is a lot sooner than you realize. How would you advise, or what would you recommend to families who may have tried 5 times and they haven't been able to have the talk?
Still haven't gotten
and
there.
Still haven't gotten there.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and it actually ended up being what made it okay for us to carry on, and we haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, but some things happened as we progressed through this time with Norma that terrified us. And our story went viral all over the world, and we weren't ready for that. And I thought I ruined our marriage, and it's a whole nother story. It was a really awful time. And what we came to was, you know what? If this story that so many millions of people are attracted to right now, if it helps one family be able to have that conversation more naturally and easily, then we will continue doing what we're doing. And so then we started getting messages from like doctors, oncologists that are having these really tough conversations with new patients, new cancer diagnosis. And this one woman, she was from Wyoming, and she wrote in and said, I just sat with someone who just got a horrible cancer diagnosis, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And she said, this is while we were still on the road, she said, I want you, before you make any decisions about treatment, I want you to go home and go to your local library, wherever you can find it, find Being Mortal, and then go onto the Driving Miss Norma Facebook page and look through all of that, and come back next week and we'll talk about treatment. And so those kinds of things started happening for us. And so the answer to your question really is to find something that resonates with your family that then opens that door a little bit.
Sure.
And yeah.
And I just got to imagine I don't know if joy would be the right word, but just the sense of accomplishment or achievement of being able to have a story where you weren't thinking of this at the time.
No.
You were just trying to help Norma.
Yeah.
And now it's made such almost I would say a societal change, and just almost a cultural shift where people are open to different almost treatment methods or paths, rather than, taking option A where, where Norma was at with radical hysterectomy, chemo, radiation, possible ICU, then rehab, but there's no guarantees any of that's going to help.
None of it. Yeah.
And she gets to go on this just remarkable adventure, and you're still taking care of her. You make mention at the time where, the work you were doing in communities and different places was on a large scale.
Yeah.
And here, how can I make that impact being a full-time caregiver for one person?
One person. Yeah.
But now you look at the answer to that question,
Here
right?
I sit.
I mean, here you sit, and you have this remarkable story that's probably resonated with millions of people and has helped millions of people, and will hopefully continue to do so.
Yeah.
One thing I was interested in, because I know, you mentioned the book Being Mortal. You were sick when you found that book. You were at a friend's house, and I think it was in the greenhouse you found the book.
Yeah.
What would have changed with the outcome if you weren't sick and you weren't there to find that book?
That's such a great question. I probably wouldn't have picked that book up if I wasn't feeling particularly mortal at the time. Sure. Like I just feel horrible and all my friends are out kayaking and having a great time and I'm just laying in bed and what can I read? And there it was, and I don't know. I don't know if I'd have the guts to put on the table what we put on the table for Norma at that point. But I learned very clearly that and we talk about this all the time, right? The conversation of quality versus quantity. And I was like, I'm in the quality camp, 100%. And so how can I live my life that way so that my life feels of a high quality, but also the people that I touch, and immediately that manifests in front of me of, wow, here I have a chance to make an impact on someone else's quality of life.
And how many others since then too, which is just such a testament. What would you say is one of your favorite memories or adventures when you were with Miss Norma? Is there one that stands out more than others? Because there's so many. There's
so many, and I feel like we haven't talked enough about what really happened, right? I just kind of set up the beginning, and there was a huge turning point. We hit the road. Norma caught a cold while we were still at her house before we left the driveway, and because of our ignorance, we're like, look at us. We're not even going to get out of the driveway and she's going to die. How are we going to do this? And we eventually got out of the driveway and headed north, went up across the Mackinac Bridge and through the UP. And Tim and I often will sleep in Walmart parking lots. It's a thing with RVers that they are very kind to allow people to do that. And we knew that in Blue Earth, Minnesota, there was a Walmart, and there was the world's largest Jolly Green Giant statue next to that parking lot. And we thought, let's kill two birds with one stone. Let's see if Norma has what it takes to sleep in a Walmart parking lot. And then there's a little fun there too. So we got her to the Jolly Green Giant, and we bought her a wheelchair. She didn't really need a wheelchair. She walked with a cane. Her mobility, she was very slow and a little resistant to the wheelchair. And when we said, we could have a lot more fun if we could go a little faster, she was like, okay, let's get a wheelchair. So we had the wheelchair. It was one of our first outings with her. Walk up to the Jolly Green Giant. That day, she happened to have a green sweater on. And I asked her if she would be okay with me taking a picture of her in front of the giant. And she locked the wheels of her wheelchair. And at this point, remember, she's in deep grief. She really hasn't said much. We don't know how this is going to go. And she's just really quiet and processing all of this change in her life. But she locks the wheels to her wheelchair. She hands Tim her cane, gets up out of her chair, walks over to the Jolly Green Giant, puts her hands on her hips, and does the identical pose that the giant is doing that's 55 feet taller than her. And I had my camera, I took a couple pictures, and I just was belly laughing.
That's great.
We didn't know that woman existed. Tim didn't know that woman existed. Right. And at that moment, she went from Norma, my mother-in-law, and mom, to Miss Norma. Like, we're going to have some fun, and that was her way of showing us that there's more in me than maybe you knew. And right around that same time, I used to keep a travel blog and realized real fast that this caregiving thing is going to make that way too cumbersome to keep up. And Facebook was way easier. So I created this Facebook page. I had 12 people, friends and family, that were like, oh yeah, we always want to know where you are. You do cool stuff, right? And so we made this Facebook page, and the first picture that I put up was this one of her at the Jolly Green Giant. It changed everything.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, I know Tim, he mentioned, in the book about how with his dad, he always wondered or wanted to say things or see how his dad felt in different things. And for Tim, this was also about him being able to have some of those questions maybe answered with his mom, with
Mm-hmm.
Norma. Did he see a side of her too then that he never knew existed?
Oh my gosh.
Because
Yeah,
I think about
yeah.
in the book, he talks about when he was cleaning out some papers and doing some different things,
Yeah.
finding these coupons or ads for hot air balloon rides.
Yes.
And it just was like a shell shock finding this.
Yeah. We had, because they lived such a just simple, plain life. Norma had a beautiful flower garden. She was always doing that. And Leo liked to putter in the vegetable garden in the summer. But we could set our watch, no matter where we were in the world, we could look at our watch and say, oh, they're listening to Paul Harvey right now at the dining room table and eating ham sandwiches. I mean, we knew exactly what they were doing. Their life was so predictable. And for Tim to have the opportunity with his mom to shake that up was
And
really
I think that's
cool.
such a special thing because not many families get that opportunity, and I think it was as much of a benefit probably for Tim and for you with her saying yes to this trip as it was for her even.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt.
And it's remarkable just to see that relationship and the interaction. It's such a special memory to be able to cherish. So there's another really good story where throughout the book and the adventure, Miss Norma, you're expressing doubts about being able to be her full-time caregiver. And as her needs started to progress, those doubts seemingly never really truly went away. Did you ever find that there was a time where you said, we got this as far as being the caregiver side as her needs continued to progress?
Gosh, Lance, I've never considered that. Okay. I mean, I think that we started being more comfortable in our role. There was a time when early on when we would be driving down the road and see something really cool, and she sat at the dinette of the RV, so she was a little bit behind us, and we would be in Yellowstone National Park and see a buffalo out the window and say, "Hey Norma, did you see that buffalo?" And I'd turn around to look at her, and she was dozing off. She didn't see the buffalo. And then we also noticed that she was having, every time she stood up, she'd get a little dizzy and she'd go, whoa, and then kind of get steady again. Her nose ran a lot. She always had a tissue. And so we started really noticing that all these little things weren't part of a great quality of life. But again, we didn't know much about what we were dealing with, and we didn't know if it was part of her illness. We didn't know she was on all kinds of medication. We didn't know if it was part of her medication, side effects, or if that's really what 90 is. That's what it looks like. Sure. We didn't know. And so we were in Colorado, and back in 2015, Colorado was one of the first states to legalize medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana in the CBD products. And so, and she had arthritis. Her hands were always pretty sore. And Tim was like, I wonder if we can get some kind of cream for her hand, like a CBD cream, and maybe we can get rid of some of the pain that she's experiencing, and take a look at maybe eliminating some of the pharmaceutical pain medications and see if that would help. And so Tim said, will you talk to her about it? Because he felt like, and he was right, that she would open up more to me than him about this stuff. And so I said, Norma, have you ever heard of this cannabis cream that you can use to, help with pain and stuff? And she's like, yeah, I've heard of that. And I said, well, you can get it here in Colorado. And she's like, oh. I said, would you like to get some? And she's like, yeah, I'm willing to try that. And I was like, oh, okay, this is easier than I thought, because she was not. Tim was a hippie in the 70s, and when she found a joint in his Levi's jeans jacket pocket, that was not a cool thing, And so she said, yeah, I'll do that. And so I said, Tim, this is great. She wants to go and get some cannabis cream. Let's see how that works. And so we're driving to Boulder, Colorado, and I said to Tim, Tim, you got to tell your mom where we're going. And because the conversation was a couple days before. And he turns around and he says, Mom, we're headed to the pot shop to get you some marijuana cream. And she said, oh, no, we're not. And I said, Tim, it's semantics. She's okay with cannabis, not with marijuana. So I had to then kind of repair that. But we went into this dispensary in Boulder, and we got her some cream. And then we also started talking to them about if there's something else that we can help with her pain, because she's been on this tramadol for years. And we knew she wasn't going to smoke anything. We knew she wasn't going to, vape anything or eat brownies and gummies and all the things that they have out there. But she does take vitamin pills, and so maybe she would be open to taking a capsule. And so we decided to try that. And she was like, yeah, let's give it a try. And she took that first capsule on. That was a Monday that we were at the store. She put the cream on her hands that night, went to bed, and her leg was a little swollen, so she put some on her leg. And the next morning, she came out of her bedroom, and she was more excited than we'd seen at all on the trip so far. And she's like, look at my hands. Like, look at them. And then she pulled up her pant leg, and she said, look at my leg. And it had pucker marks, that the swelling had reduced by 50%.
Wow.
We're like, wow, that's amazing. She's like, yeah. And so by that Friday, so she started taking her capsules on Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday morning, she comes out. Tim's out walking Ringo, our dog, and she leans over and whispers like the walls are listening. And she had uterine cancer.
Right.
She was bleeding through 2 sanitary pads a day with this cancer. She leans over to me and she said, I think I stopped bleeding. You're kidding. What do you think about that? And she said, well, I think we need to go back to that marijuana store. And we did. And so we were able to get her off of all of her prescription meds and get her on a CBD capsule once a day. And the dizziness stopped, the runny nose stopped, and she was up all day, every day, completely alert, aware, and enjoying the buffalo and whatever else was out the window.
Had any of her doctors ever suggested that or recommended trying it?
No, well, it was 2015. I mean, so many things have changed since then, you know, and so no, that never happened, and it just was an incredible transformation. And so, I mean, that's a really long story to get back to your question of when did we feel capable of caring. And I think it was when she came to life, and it didn't feel like caregiving anymore. It felt like we're having a great time.
Yeah, another traveling partner.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. One of the things that I absolutely loved and really resonated with me in the book, Ramie, was when you said it's the difference between being alive and actually living. Make that distinction. What you meant by that?
The word living, the verb of it's an action word, right. And kind of being alive. Yep, you're living and living. There I go, use it. But you're breathing and you're not living.
To me, with Miss Norma, her being alive was in that home. Mm-hmm. She became alive and living when she got in the trailer, the camper.
Yeah.
Has your definition of being alive and living changed at all after going through this adventure with her? Is it any different from where it was when you started the trip versus now several years after?
Yeah, I think that I go back to really I hadn't given it a whole bunch of thought beforehand. Right. And now I'm just so committed to that action word,
right?
And the living, because sometimes people would write us a note and say yes to life, and that's not what it is. It's living on a high level, and the quality of life is there. The quality,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of touches on this too. Another thing that really resonates with me, and I'm sure it will with a lot of families, is you talk about how caregiving isn't just rainbows and butterflies. That's so true. But I think for people watching or listening, it's understanding it's not going to be perfect at all times, but it's the memories and the joy and the things you get to be a part of that really, all that other stuff doesn't matter. You're going to have good days and bad days, but I think the good far outweigh the bad. And just like with Tim, and even for yourself, being able to have that special bond and all these remarkable memories that you have of, Miss Norma, and all the lives that her story, your story, and Tim's story, and Ringo's story has just touched. It's truly remarkable. There are families that won't have the benefit of being able to travel and take their loved one, but there's other ways they can probably help them to live. What would you recommend to a family who maybe they're still working and they can't retire, but they have either a sick child, spouse, or a parent, and they want to do something for them, kind of like what you guys have done for Miss Norma? How can they do it without having to be able to travel and go see the world? What would you recommend to them?
Well, we have no illusions that this is the right way to do things. It just worked for our family, and some people have no interest in traveling, and that's fine. In fact, we talked a lot with Norma on the road, like, how would Leo do in this situation? She goes, oh, he would hate it. He would hate it, but it worked for us. What we found, and we write about this towards the end of the book, is that Norma kept a journal every single day. And I alluded to the fact that we went viral, and there are millions of people around the world that followed our story on this little Facebook page. But after she died, we had an opportunity to read her journal. We never looked at it until then. And the things that she wrote about were remarkable. The things that mattered to her. It wasn't that she was sick, that she had this devastating diagnosis. It wasn't that she was famous and recognized everywhere we went, and people dropped to their knees and wept to hold her hand. She didn't write about that. She wrote about the little things, the little experiences of the bunny that hopped in front of her wheelchair one day at a campground, or wow, we had some really good ice cream today, and those were the things that when, we had this epic journey and come down from this gigantic high and realized that it was being engaged in life on such, it was the simple things that mattered, the little things. And so to recommend how you replicate that, really know who you're caring for, and expose them to experiences somehow. And it might be that they can't leave a room, but to have a bird feeder outside, to have their grandchildren coming and singing, to do activities that they're accustomed to. We were visiting a friend of ours whose mom is pretty deep in the dementia world right now, but she used to be an amazing bridge player. And we sat down and her son stacked the deck so that she would win every time. And we played a couple rounds of bridge with her. And she didn't remember what was Trump ever, but she was engaged in this game. And after a while, she said, "Give me that deck." And she grabbed the deck, and she dealt those cards like someone from Las Vegas. It was that was her muscle memory of something that brought her joy for years and years and years. And that's different for everybody, but it's
that's living, things, right?
Living.
That's living, right? Exactly. One of the things I think is fascinating too is that you guys started to be noticed, getting recognized. You mentioned with me previously before coming in that you had to stop posting pictures because what happened one day after you posted a picture from somewhere you guys had been?
Yeah, so it was in the spring, and we were in Georgia. And I mentioned before, we camp in Walmart sometimes, right? When we're just trying to get from point A to point B. Sure. So we pulled over. We're in this Walmart parking lot, and the red buds and the cherry trees, all these blossoms and blooms on the trees. And Norma was a gardener, and she loves flowers. And so we parked the rig, And Tim is our chef, always made every meal for us. And so he's working on dinner. And I said, Norma, let's go for a walk. And we walked across the parking lot to look at the cherry trees. And Tim from the motorhome saw us, and I'm holding Norma's hand, and he takes this cute little picture. And so we decided to post it on our thing of sometimes the most beautiful places are Walmart parking lots. That was it. And went to bed that night, and the next morning we get up and open the door, and there is a car parked right outside of our motorhome.
Wow.
And it was this woman and her adult daughter, made up to the nines with makeup and hair and jewels and all this stuff, and a plate of donuts and a bunch of coffee, and then creamers and sugar. We don't know how you like your coffee, but here you go. And we just wanted to meet Miss Norma. We saw that you were here. We're like, how many Walmart parking lots are there in the country? Right. And they figured it out.
That's incredible.
And Norma was still sleeping, and they never did get to meet her. But that was a lovely experience. They were very kind, and it was like, I don't know, that feels a little bit
a little too close.
Too close.
Yeah.
And so we started not posting until we left places after that. So.
When you started to see Miss Norma's health entering into a new phase, and you'd mentioned it's going to be more than, I think, bloody knees and maybe the hiking and trailing and mountain climbing, that sort of thing, those days may be past. What were your thoughts? Like, what was going through your mind? Are we going to be able to continue the trip? Do we need to do something differently? How did you approach this new phase, the ending phase, if you will?
Yeah, so it kind of happened in two stages for us, Lance. So when we were in Pittsburgh, we started to notice that she was having symptoms of probably congestive heart failure. Again, we don't know a lot, and this is 10 months into our trip, and she did not want to see a doctor. And we had promised her no more poking and prodding, but it was getting to a point where we were like, we don't know what we're dealing with, and we will honor your wishes as much as possible, but would you please go with us to at least have an understanding of how to make you more comfortable through this. And so it took a few days to talk her into that, and we went to this hospital ER in Pittsburgh, and they're looking at her like, yeah, she's got some heart issues. And the nurse comes in, the intake nurse, with her clipboard, and she said, so when's the last time you saw your doctor? And Norma said, what's it been, Timmy, 10 months? And she's like, yeah, 10 months. And the nurse looked at us like, this is a 90-year-old woman who hasn't been to a doctor in 10 months? Like, how dare you? And the ironic part of that is that was a Monday. The Sunday paper, the day before, we were on the front page. Wow. Miss Norma makes a pit stop in Pittsburgh. And yeah, it was a half-page article of our journey. And we had to find a kind way to say to the nurse, perhaps you haven't read the paper lately, and take her out in the hall and let her know what we were up to. And she started crying. She apologized to us. She said it's so refreshing to have a conversation with a family that have gone through the process of being really clear about what their loved ones' wants and needs are. And then we went through the same process once the doctor came in, and kind of the finger wag of how dare you. And we remembered back to when we left her house in northern Michigan 10 months before. Her calendar was hanging on the wall in the kitchen, and when you look at that calendar, it used to have social activities, the pancake breakfast or the church social, and dinner with so and so and playing cards here, and now we look, and all it was doctor's appointments. 100% for either her or Leo or both of them. And so we're like, yeah, no wonder they're surprised that she hasn't been to a doctor in 10 months. So we understood what she was dealing with. They gave us some Lasix to deal with the fluids retention, and we went on our way. Norma said, let's keep going, keep traveling. And so we did, and we made it from Pittsburgh all the way. We were getting invitations from people from all over the world to come skydiving, come mush dogs in the Iditarod, come to Holland and look at the tulips, all of this stuff. But we had friends from Baja, where we camped every winter, that lived on San Juan Island in Washington State. And we got invitations, not from our friends, but other people completely unrelated. Hey, I have a whale watching company. Come and I'll take you to go see the orcas. And we own a lavender farm. Will you come? We'd love to have Norma at our lavender farm. And so we thought, let's go there. That sounds fun. So back across, this is the second loop now, back across the northern tier of the country. And we got there and parked on our friend's land, and it wasn't long until the real decline really started to happen. And that's when we remembered that first doctor that said, if you get to a point where you need some help, call hospice wherever you are. And so we did that.
And you also, something I was really happy to see is you utilized 5 wishes.
Absolutely.
Not too long ago, we had the privilege of speaking to Joanne Eastman. She's the president of 5 Wishes, and such a remarkable resource. And I was so happy to see that you guys had that for her. And if I'm going to let you explain what it was and how Miss Norma took advantage of it, because it's such a great tool for families.
It's so cool and so easy, and that's, I think, what attracted us to us. And it was when Leah was in the hospital dying. Norma was getting all these tests one after another to figure out what was going on with her. And so we were in the hospital in Alpena, Michigan every day. And here this thing was in a brochure rack in the lobby of the hospital. It was the 5 Wishes. So I grabbed a couple of those and just kind of, I was busy with other things, but had those, and I was like, this might be helpful at some point. I'd never heard of it before. And so the 5 Wishes basically is a really friendly advance directive that allows you to choose your medical power of attorney, but also really, how do you want to be treated? And so we filled this out, all 3 of us. I got 3 copies of it. So I was doing my 5 wishes along with Tim and Norma, and we sat down together and did it. And one of the questions on there was about, do you want people to come and read to you, or play your favorite kind of music, or maybe some hymns from your church, or that kind of stuff? Would you like to have a massage? And then it said, would you like your caregivers to use, I forget the exact words, but essential oils?
Right.
And Norma perked up. She was pretty clear about most of them. Yes, no, and then she was like, ooh, and she wrote yes, and then she put lavender oil. Yeah, she loved her lavender, and so when it came to at the real decline, and when she was bedbound at the end of her life, we happened to, before that, went to that lavender farm that we got invited to, and they gifted her a bunch of products, and she had lavender.
Well, something too, Ramie, that really stood out throughout the book, a couple of things. You guys mentioned Stacy, who was Tim's sister, who had passed away years prior. Mm-hmm. But Miss Norma, several times says, it's Stacy looking out for us, Stacy helping us out. Yes. Whether it was, getting to, it might have been Yellowstone and there's no parking, but you pulled right up to the handicap. On your way, because you couldn't use Leo's Jeep to be pulled. Yep. You had to go buy a new Jeep, and you made a trip, was about an hour to the dealership. Yeah. And he called and said, we just happen to have what you're looking for. Yeah. And I think Miss Norma says in the car, that was Stacy looking out for us.
Thanks, Stace. Yeah.
There were so many examples like that. I mean, it just felt like everything and this is easy for me to say, it just seems like everything always worked out almost perfectly. That may not always have been the case, but it sure seems like every bit of your trip, your adventure, was just executed flawlessly. I mean, that might be overstating it. Okay. But you know what I mean? It just seemed like there's so many examples. It's like, wow, this is something bigger than just you guys. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, Stacy, just a little hint. Stacy was the most remarkable woman I've ever met in my life. This is Tim's sister. She was the second highest ranking woman in the Secret Service.
Wow.
And she, I mean, when she was alive, she could move satellites. So Tim and I would go kayaking in the backcountry, and we'd see some satellite go by, and he's like, that might be Stace, just making sure we're safe. You know, I mean, she always had our interest in mind, and she died very tragically at a young age, and it broke all of our hearts. We feel completely ripped off by her death. But boy, yeah, she was our guardian angel during this time. And really, you are right. A lot of things went well for us. A lot of things. I don't want to give the impression that caregiving is easy.
Right.
And so there definitely were times, and we laugh about that in the book too, of the times when it was hard. And fortunately, we had such an incredible bond built between the three of us at the end when it got really hard,
Right.
that our communication was pretty flawless. And you know, we were able to talk about stuff that a year before, there's no way we were terrified to bring that stuff up.
And was there ever a time where either you as the wife or Tim as the son of Miss Norma, was there ever a thought that crossed the mind saying, you know what, we can't keep going, maybe we need to wrap up the trip? Or was that ever an issue?
There were times when it was really hard, and I when you said that, I heard Tim's voice in my head of like, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this.
Because I can't imagine. I mean, it's gotta be, because like you said, caregiving is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, you can't go upstairs or downstairs.
Right. We're within 8 feet of each other.
Or just go in the car and go
Yeah.
down to the store to get a soda or a water or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you what, Ringo, and we can go down that line of conversation about therapeutic animals.
Right.
And he was a 73-pound standard poodle. Norma was always a cat person. She wasn't so sure about sharing her space with a large dog, even as fluffy and cute as he was. But he made a gigantic difference in her sense of well-being. And early in the trip, Tim and I would go out on a hike or bike ride or something like that, and we would leave Ringo with Norma, and she felt okay about being in the motorhome with him. So he provided that kind of a comfort. And then as things went on, when we did need space, because we were in a really closed space, that blow up mattress that I talk about, we had to make our bed every day and then deflate it. We went through 3 of those on this trip. I mean, they're not made to be used every day, and they're made for kids visiting grandma, you know. And so Ringo really helped us with, like, I need some space, I'm going to go walk the dog, you know, and give us that kind of mental health thing, relief. But the hard stuff, honestly, really, where I am hearing Tim's voice, like, we can't do this anymore, it was once we were on San Juan Island, and her decline was just, it was heartbreaking, like it is with every family. Right. And this is his mom, and this is his last living relative. You know, he lost his sister, he lost his dad, now he's losing his mom, and
well, and Miss Norma also Tim's uncle, right? Shortly around the same time, her brother.
Norma's brother. He was the second to last lighthouse keeper at the Presqu'île Light. Yeah, okay. Really cool guy. And
was that in the book about the lighthouse keeper?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe I missed it. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. But on his 90th birthday, he went skydiving.
Wow.
And every now and then I think, I wonder if that's why Norma said yes to this trip. Like, Ralph can't outdo me.
He's not going to outdo me. Yeah.
But he died that same summer. He died in June. Leo died exactly a month later in July. And it's hard. I never stop to think about what does it feel like when you have no family left.
It's unbelievable. And Ringo recently passed in April, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. So on a other note, Norma was Grand Marshal of Parades. I mean, she was with the Atlanta Hawks cheerleaders. There's not a lot she hasn't done, which is just, I think it's such an inspiration for other people just to, like you say, go out and live, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really saw kind of continuously through the book or throughout the book was Norma would sometimes say, I bet you're glad I came along.
Yeah.
So my question is, were you glad she came along?
Oh my God, ecstatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do it 100 times again.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, I can't thank you enough for sharing the story. And I'm hoping that others will, and it doesn't even have to be a story about a person with terminal illness or even needing a caregiver. It's about living your life.
Yeah.
Take advantage of this, like you said, the small moments. And hopefully this story will help our viewers and listeners. And, Miss Norma probably had no idea what she was getting into when she said yes to that trip. And I'm glad she did.
So let me tell you one little story that just makes my heart sing is we had all this all media attention from really around the world, and she was in every newspaper, from China to Germany to, it was unbelievable. And what would happen is the journalists would send us questions in an email, and then I would ask Norma the questions and then type exactly her words and send it back to them. And one day we got this request from a Chinese newspaper, and obviously the questions are like translated through Google Translate, and so some of them
not always the best translation.
Some of them made zero sense, but some of them did. And one of the questions we hadn't been asked by anyone else, and the question was, in all of your life, by this time she's 91, and they said, in your whole life, what are you most proud of? And I couldn't wait to hear the answer to that. I never thought to ask her myself, and flash through. Okay, she was a child of the Depression. She served in World War II. She was a foster parent. She raised these two amazing kids. All these things. Like, where do you say this is it?
Right.
And she sat there for a while, and I imagine that slideshow going through her head of her whole life. And then she looked up at me, and a little tear came down her eye, which was very rare. And she said, what we're doing right now. She got it.
She got it.
She got it. She understood that her saying yes gave permission to have the courage. Like you said, it's not just an end of life story. It's the courage to be your true self and to figure out what it is that's holding you back in your life, and then say yes to it and just go for it.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I look at it like this too, Ramie, from outside of, the trip. She's still living through you and Tim and her story, and, you being gracious to meet with us to share the story. And hopefully, it'll continue to inspire people all around the world. And you also have the Miss Norma Facebook page, and we're going to have the links up for all of your contacts as well. And I suggested to you the other day that you should do a Miss Norma caregiving book. So who knows, maybe in the future you'll come back and we'll be talking about that.
I have to give credit to Lance.
No. If it helps people, that's all we care about.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know if there's another book in me, but I can tell you that one of the things, and probably the piece of her legacy that has touched us the most, is that we created a private Facebook page called Miss Norma's Caregivers Retreat. And it's a support group for caregivers.
How can people, do they contact or get in touch to that group through the Miss Norma Facebook page?
You can. I often will post, so any post that's in the last 4 years, probably you'll find a reference to it, either in the post or in the comments. But it's also, we have missnorma.com, so you can find it through there. But it's pretty remarkable. Very supportive community of caregivers.
Well, and also you and Tim are, you have a fellowship now.
We had a fellowship.
Fellowship.
And that was with the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care, and they're doing a lot of advocacy work for caregivers and for underserved populations, and really trying to shine the light on this gigantic need that right?
Right.
Of how many thousands of unpaid caregivers are out there that
It's astonishing. It truly is. And, Miss Norma is so fortunate that she had you and she had Tim, where both of you were retired and you could do this for her, because she may not have had other options available other than going into maybe a facility or, who knows what. And, it's just, it's wonderful that you're helping to spread this story, and there's resources, like the Coalition for Advanced Care, as well as the Miss Norma caregiver group as well. So we'll have all those links on our site, as well as in the show notes for the episode and this interview. And I just thank you again for joining us.
What a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so
great.
much.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for watching today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.